So, in the Myers-Briggs typology system, the psyche is divided into four main components, four dimensions, if you will, which are then subdivided again into a further two, giving us a total of 8 cognitive functions. These being your perceiving functions, which are your sensory and your intuitive, and your judging functions, which are your thinking and your feeling. So for this video, I'm going to assume that you're familiar with all 8, so I won't have to explain them from the very beginning, otherwise this video would be an hour long. But if you're not familiar, that's also fine, because I will be delving deep into all of them within the next couple of videos, and if you're at all good at picking up context clues, then you should be fine. So, see, in most of the popular niches of this topic, and in every description that I managed to find, the cognitive functions, or at least the descriptions of them, are always lacking in some way. They're too surface level, too context dependent. They ignore function dynamics, but mainly where they trip up is failing to pin down the general MO of the functions. They fail to notice that there is a philosophy that is attached to each of them. So I guess the most misunderstood function is as good a place as any to start. So I will be focused on the extroverted feeling and the introverted feeling functions for this video, because that, in my opinion, those are the most grossly misunderstood functions of all of them. So these two are called the feeling functions, but I really don't like that word, because feelings imply fleeting emotional states, and their operations are not so much to do with whims, but more to do with values and preferences. The source of all values and preferences are essentially feelings when you get right down to it. Like, it's completely arbitrary, but the way I see it described online makes it out to seem extremely, childish and stupid, like feeling like FE and FI users are just these petulant children that can't be reasoned with, and they do whatever they want, and people are okay with that. Like, they happily identify with those descriptions and wear them like a badge of honor. Like, yes, I'm stupid and selfish and immature in way. Like, it makes me sad sometimes. Well, anyway, like, if you're an immature F user, then obviously it can come off that way. But if you have FI or FE as your savior function, then it is highly unlikely that you haven't developed it enough for you to be able to be an adult with it when you use it. It's like, that's definitely not the case for ISFPs or even ESFJs, like the way most people think. I mean, I know they're portrayed as these sensitive, ethereal sugar pixies that are just wonderful. Like, really, really, people who have F as a dominant function haven't found it. You really think that people who have F as a dominant function haven't found a way to overcompensate for their sensitivity through peacocking with their demon? Like, even that term peacocking, I think it was Dave's Personality here on YouTube that came up with the idea, where the way people try to overcompensate for the weakness of their saviors and the over reliance of their saviors is by over exaggerating their demons to sort of bring a natural balance to the state of things. And it is so true. I mean he's got a point. I know INTPs that are extremely social and considerate, and INFPs who are very cool-headed and well put together, and ESFJs who are just, well, bitchy and assertive. Okay, fine. More so assertive than bitchy, but I'm getting off topic. But the reason why the feeling function is important in terms of a biological reason is because you can't act in the world without having any values, any preferences, any way to value one thing over another thing. I mean, because if you look at the map, If you look at the world at this map of endless goals and obstacles for which you have to navigate through, then it is up to you to decide which of those goals are worth pursuing and which are not, which obstacles are worth the effort of overcoming and which are not. You know, why did the chicken cross the road? Because roadside B was better than roadside A. There. It's the most fundamental answer to that question. And there are two ways that you can decide how to value things or how you like things: by being born a certain way or by majority rules. Again, that's FI, FE. So, the name of the game with these two are identity building. That's why you have them. They're preferences that orient you towards who you want to be, and they define who you are as well. So either you get those values from your tribe or from yourself, or in individual cases, your preferences are dictated by the preferences of the many, or your preferences can be dictated by you alone, I guess. So the more I think about this, the more I'm convinced that this is the way that it works. Because there are only two ways to conceptualize your identity growing up, and that's either through a case of building it, which is a process of form and structure. This would be FE, or through a process of self-discovery, if you will, which is FI. It's almost as if no, it's not almost, it is. It's FE sees their identity as external. Their identity is structural, but it's external. FI sees its identity as structural, but it's internal, and it's innate. It's something that they have to figure out for themselves. This is why FI is big on the idea of live and let live, because they want the freedom. They want to have the freedom to be able to explore all their options, and essentially explore their own identity, explore that structure of their own internal identity. Whereas that FE is the complete opposite of that. They more value individual autonomy for its control, freedom of thought because it's necessary for that freedom of thought to judge the values and preferences that will make up their own identity, so that they can kind of construct it themselves. They can build themselves. You know, they're the masters of their fate. They're the captains of their soul, so to speak. And personally, I think that these two maxims are at the core of what makes the EFJ stereotype the EFJ stereotype, and the IFP stereotype the IFP stereotype. See, for most of your childhood, what counts as you is this sort of nebulous concept of which there is no form and structure. So you have to build that for yourself. If you feel that the structures are already within you, then you must discover your identity instead of forming it. And because the best way of getting to know a person is through their faults, because Truity and Thought Catalog and Tumblr have stroked the egos of enough personality types as it is already, I'm going to focus in this video exclusively on what these two functions are supposed to do but fall short of. You know, how they miss the mark. How they mishap. So this falling short could either be due to simple underdevelopment or over-reliance on the functions. It could be either, but that's very typical of function dynamics, and I won't get too particular about those in this video. So, FE, right? FE is oriented towards the extroverted world. It's its orientation, meaning it's the way their feeling is oriented, meaning that it will be coupled with introverted thinking. And I also don't understand why sites and MBTI gurus are so gung-ho about describing functions individually. Like, I just didn't. As soon as I understood the theory in its entirety properly, it just stopped making sense to me, because you can't look at a single function without looking at its opposite function as well, without taking that into consideration, because it's sort of a one-sided description. It's not a proper analysis. Like, without TI, there is no FE. You need the introverted thinking there, otherwise the FE is completely unsupported, and its actions and its processes will seem unfounded, but in reality they're not. They're just not explained very properly. So yeah, they're both useless without the other. The way an extroverted feeler approaches a situation in which it's not clear what the human universal or the right answer is they look to the majority, majority rules. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. And this doesn't have to be like a big grandiose moral decision either. It could just be a preference, like a simple preference, like in a group of friends. Guys, where do you want to eat? Do you feel like getting, I don't know, Thai or Mexican? I don't know, who's up for pasta? And then the FE user, it's almost like the FE user doesn't even know what they would like to eat in the moment until everybody else has already decided. It's like they've no concept of what they would enjoy. I mean, they probably could tell you if you pressed them on it. Obviously, everybody could, but it's easier for them to go along with what everybody else wants rather than deciding for themselves. So yeah, if their TI is particularly weak, then when it comes time to use it, FE will usually outsource TI thinking to the group instead of having to deal with themselves. This behavior roughly translates to, well, if everyone chooses X, then they must have had a good reason to choose X. Otherwise, why would they choose something that it's bad for themselves, you know? And a response to that logic is usually, well, if all your friends go jump off a bridge, then are you going to jump off a bridge too? But apparently FE users don't really get that. And I think the reason why that behavior or personality quirk, why that develops that sort of outsourcing of reasoning and logic to the group instead of it being internal, is because FE users who are really weak in their thinking realize from a very early age that they're just incompetent at it. Like they can't analyze situations in a way where they can control the outcomes. And so what they figure out is that's okay, whatever most people think is right, I'm just going to go along with them because they probably thought it through way better than I could have, way more rigorously than I could have, so I'm just going to go with that. And so they don't trust themselves. That's it. That's what I think it is. They just don't trust themselves. So yeah, if they're immature, their morals are pretty fast and loose as well. This is because they've got that pesky TI, and they recognize that all situations are different and they need to be considered on an individual case-by-case basis. So basically, if an FE user is faced with a new situation, there is no magic rule book for them that they can consult which will tell them what is the right thing to do when one thing is worth more than another thing. So when there is no tribe to tell, when there is no consensus to tell the FE user what the right decision is, they must choose for themselves. It can take a while for them to make up their mind. And this is why they appear wishy-washy sometimes, because they really are considering the situation as a whole in the moment, trying to decide what they should value about it. But because they've got no internal compass, they can't. And now this is the more turbulent side of FE, by the way, what I've been describing. And the side that the internet seems to be most familiar with, but there's also a second, lesser, more evil side, or not lesser, but lesser known, evil, more assertive side of FE. And this is the side that doesn't just want to conform to the majority, but it wants to be the majority at all costs. And funny enough, it actually, if you look at this behavior in actual people, you will see a lot of the behaviors that these assertive FE types exhibit. They will, they will overlap a lot with the ETJ's cutthroat, bitchy behavior. So this is the, this is the popular girl, the cheerleader, the shit stirrer, the one that insists that it knows what's best for you and you just need to shut up and let them do it. So this side arises mainly from the misuse of their introverted thinking. See, Effie is passionate about finding compromises, ways that work for everybody. In TI terms, that would be logic that applies to everybody in every situation. EFJs are more prone to being seduced by this idea for the simple fact that they are more effective and orderly in the real world, like they're just more practical. Like I said, that's very reminiscent of an ENTJ or an ESTJ. So by doing this, they're just trying to be more efficient by adhering to collective values, like in regards to their judging systems. These types do this by finding and attaching themselves to certain ideas that are moral in nature. These need not be political, by the way, but they usually are. They usually are. You see, they view politics as having a lot of outreach and influence, and the further the outreach and influence, the better. That's just FE being FE, really, you know. And these group moralities that they attach themselves to are usually borrowed ideas, and I mean something very specific by that. Borrowed ideas and opinions that seem to describe the FE user on the surface, and they adopt them as their own, but by the same token, they fail to notice that these ideas and opinions originated from somewhere that's outside themselves, say, like in a person or a book or a video. They haven't got anything to do with themselves as a person. You see this a lot when every time you hear a rally or an FE type making a passionate claim that's very, very general and very hopeful, very inspiring, or on the opposite extreme, maybe it's calling out some sort of injustice. Every time you hear an FE speak with conviction about about what they think is right, a lot of the times when you examine what they're saying, this is, by the way, if the FE user is corrupt and unhealthy. I should probably make that clear at this point. A lot of the times you will find that what they say is very superficial. It's very superficial, and it's almost always external. It's got nothing to do with themselves. It's like it's always about some sort of injustice that was done to a group of people at a very specific event or situation, or a system of injustices that's been done to a group of people in a more general sense. So if I it's kind of like the ESFJ and the ENFJ. The ESFJ would be more the individual case, the individual injustice. Oh, what about this case? And what about this? And what about this? And then the ENFJ, this is why ENFJs would be more political. ESFJs would be more, traditional sort of sense. They would hold themselves to traditional moral standards, whatever that may happens to be. And then the ENFJs would get political a lot of the time because they want to address the general injustice that's been done to a group of people. But in either case, it's always a group, and it's never about them. It's always someone else, and any example that they can cite is never personal. And if it is personal, it has a lot to do with exaggerations as well, but that just comes from TI corruption and untruthfulness. So again, I'm speaking purely of unhealthy FE users. So yes, they when these kind of people talk, they sound like mouthpieces. They don't sound truthful. They sound fake. That's where it comes from. They sound fake and manipulative. So anyway, that's why all of this is what I mean by these types construct who they are, and that they're architects of their personality, because they adopt collective values and collective sensibilities onto themselves without without checking with themselves if it's okay or not, or without refining them at all within themselves. They just hear these things, and they hear them, and they hear them, and they align themselves to the idea, to the viewpoint, instead of the other way around. So yeah, FE users form alliances with people. They also form alliances with ideas. And oh, by the way, I also might want to mention that the healthy version of FE types are actually very good at taking valuable bits of information here and here, a little there, and stitching themselves an opinion that is truly their own. So they're good at chewing the meat and spitting out the bones, whenever they hear something, whenever they come across something. The healthy types of it, the healthy FE users build themselves an identity the same way, birds build themselves a nest. They just fly around collecting bits of twigs of information and then sort of building a home of branches where they can exist. So yeah, that's what a healthy sort of construction of a personality would be. Instead of adopting one, you create one. So yeah, that's the healthy approach. And by the way, the better your TI gets at refining ideas down to its principles, the better you'll be at finding more valuable branches for your nest. So the key to any FE development is always through TI. There's no other way. But at the same time, because they didn't take the effort to form these beliefs themselves, if they didn't, they just sort of commandeer them from other people. They have no right to them as a form of identity. They have no right to them as a form to identify themselves with. Like FE users, what you gotta understand is that if you have just sort of hung a label on yourself, whatever that label might be, political or otherwise, it doesn't really matter. But if it's a label, if you identify yourself with a group, you got to be really careful that group doesn't start to puppet you. Like you've no right to say that idea is you, and then that's all you are. Like, I'm not saying scrap any and all ideas and opinions from your brain, or preferences that you didn't specifically explore or figure out from yourself, or you didn't hear from someone else, or you didn't get from a book or whatever. I'm not saying that, because then nothing would be left. Like, you need a foundation. What I'm saying is that don't mistake the externalization of your identity as your actual identity, because it's reductive and incomplete and fake. Say it with me. It's fake. It's fake because it's manipulative, because the idea is manipulating you, and because you're using that idea by talking with other people and expecting them to act accordingly, you're also manipulating them. That's why FE users, the unhealthy ones, are known for being fake. Right, this video is pretty long. I was actually gonna go into FI, but I have a feeling that because this video is bordering on the half-hour mark, I think I'm just gonna leave that for a different day. But yeah, that was the feeling dimension. I think I addressed everything that I wanted to, but we'll see.